Like psychoanalysis, existentialism seeks to utilize these very conflicts as avenues to the more profound self-understanding of man. In many ways, existentialism is the unique and specific portrayal of the psychological predicament of contemporary man. Okay, so that relates back to the idea that modern people have been stripped of their archaic belief systems and are exposed more completely to the possibility of a meaningless and painful existence with no superordinate meaning. Existentialism is not a school of thought nor reducible to any set of tenets. The three writers who appear invariably on every list of existentialists, Jaspers, Heidegger and Sartre, are not in agreement on essentials. Such alleged precursors as Pascal and Kierkegaard differed from all three men by being dedicated Christians, and Pascal was a Catholic of sorts while Kierkegaard was a Protestant's Protestant. If, as often done, Nietzsche and Dostoevsky are included in the fold, then we must make room for an impassioned anti-Christian, Nietzsche, and an even more fanatical Greek Orthodox Russian imperialist. That's a little hard on Dostoevsky, I would say, but by the time we consider adding Rilke, Kafka, Ortega, and Camus, it becomes plain that one essential feature shared by all these men is their perfervid individualism. Well, so that's another element of existentialism. The locale of action is in the individual, and the idea is that, well, you're fated in some sense to suffer and to be vulnerable as an individual, and so the right unit of analysis for people is as individuals. And again, I would say that's a primary tenet of psychotherapy. There are family psychotherapy schools, for example, but individual psychotherapy is predicated on the idea that the individual is the right level of analysis, the correct level of analysis. Intense, committed. I can give you an interesting example of this. One of the things that you guys are going to do is you're going to do the personality analysis, which is part of this self-authoring suite that my colleagues and I have developed. If you take maps of meaning, you would also do the future authoring exercise. And we've done that for people, mostly university students, mostly in Europe. So I want to tell you an interesting story, and this has been replicated a couple of times. So in the business school at the Rotterdam School of Management, we've put about 4,000 students through this future authoring program. That helps you make a plan for 3 to 5 years into the future, a plan and a counter plan. The plan is what you want to have happen, and the counter plan is what you really do not want to have happen. And then you make a plan to avoid the latter and to move towards the former. And we compared their performance, 3 years students' performance, to the performance of students 3 years before that. So it wasn't a perfect design, although we also did a controlled study that had the same results. So before we started having people do this plan, here was the ranking of performance. So we looked at ethnicity and gender. So the top performing people were Dutch national women. And they were a minority among the business students, and probably a fairly selected minority. So maybe that's what accounted for their higher performance. Although women tend to be outperforming men in academic institutions pretty much all the way from elementary school through university now, which is an absolute catastrophe, but we won't talk about that now. So, and then the next highest performing group were Dutch nationals, and then the next highest performing group were non-Western ethnic minority women, and the lowest performing group were non-Western ethnic minority men. And there were quite a few people in all those categories, so it wasn't just even a couple dozen, it was a couple hundred. Solid study. And within 2 years after doing the future authoring program, the non-Western ethnic minority men were outperforming the Dutch women. Their academic performance went up 70%, and their dropout rate plummeted, and it really looks good for decreasing dropout rate. And the reason I'm telling you about that is because people make the automatic assumption that ethnic disparities in ethnic performance are necessarily a consequence of sociological inequality, let's say, or sociological or political or economic disparity, let's say. This was a pure psychological intervention. It wiped out the difference completely. And the Dutch women had actually improved slightly over that 2-year period as a consequence of doing the program as well. So the men not only caught up to the women the way they were performing, but the way they were performing even better in the aftermath of having a plan. So our provisional theory, we've replicated that at a couple of places. It works better for men. Now that's partly because women are already doing well. But we have a hypothesis that men are ornery enough so that unless they have their own plan, they just won't perform. I think it's associated with disagreeableness. Now we don't know that for sure because we haven't been able to disentangle that, but it's been a very striking finding. So anyway, so you can say, well, what's the right level of analysis when you're trying to improve human adaptation? It's a terrible word, but it'll do for now because I can't think of another one. So